Well, thanks for joining us on this cold and snowy and icy February 2021 date. I'm David Couch with the Kentucky Department of Education. This is our monthly get together with all the Kentucky K-12 CIOs and EdTech leaders across the state. Thanks for joining us. We have a variety of our staff here as well. We've also asked 2 school districts to join us. We also have Ghost Soapbox in the invite this morning. I sent you a link to that and some questions that we'll be asking, some poll questions, but also anytime during this webcast, you can populate the questions on there you have or comments, and obviously we'll try to address the ones that bubble to the very top. This is our way for those that are brand new to share some information that's going on within districts. Typically, I would be at a district site today. A year ago today, I was in Spencer County. And the month before that, I was at Frankfort Independent. So I'm looking forward to getting back to those days. We're actually at a school location, and we have part of the school staff team there interacting with them and finding out how things are playing out at that time within their district. But until we can do that again, we have chosen this approach, bringing on a couple of our districts and, give a little bit of background district, but also kind of playing out how things are playing out right now during this part of the school year for them, and hopefully in regards to education, technology services that they provide. So I appreciate our 2 districts that have joined us today. We have Henry County Schools with Superintendent Terry Price and CIO Nicole Bauer, and then Russell County Schools, Superintendent Michael Ford and CIO Chris Bell. So I'm going to let Henry County Schools go first. Nicole, good to see you. Superintendent Price, good to see you. So I'll let you guys give some background and what's going on in your district.
Good morning, David. I'll let Terry give us a little bit of a background about the district as a whole.
Okay. As far as the demographics of our district, we're resting at about 1,900 to 2,000 students. As far as if we look at what we've done regarding the pandemic and entered into that last March, we were notified on a Thursday that we needed to go to NTI on the Monday. We were not traditionally an NTI district, so we had no clue on what we were going to do. But I will tell you, I don't know if it was a miracle or just something amazing. We did turn that around. We got our virtual learning academy going by that Monday. And I guess it was mainly a learning process from March until May last school year. Then over the summer, obviously not knowing what was going on, my assistant superintendent, who, in Henry County, we're small, so we wear many different hats, and she's my instructional guru, very, very good at what she does. And they got together and we're not offering any kind of a CAN type curriculum. Our teachers got together even for virtual learning to design our curriculum based on the standards. When I talk about a CAN curriculum, the only thing that we are using for credit recovery is obviously we're using Edgenuity. And I do know that, we're one of a 5-member district in iLead, and obviously probably people have heard of iLead. They're using some online platforms and so forth. With that, when we started to come back, we for our middle and our high school, based on numbers, we did a hybrid AB, and we're continuing with that. We have the option for any parent to choose the Virtual Learning Academy for the remainder of the school year. They can always be in person and go to virtual learning, but they can't be virtual learning and come back at the drop of a hat in person just because of our plan and our schedule for numbers. We have slowly ramped it back to where we have started in person, again on the hybrid. And my thinking right now with looking at the incident rates and sometimes I don't want to applaud myself for being seen as a rebel every now and then, but sometimes I think a little bit differently and I try to push the envelope, and I'm probably going to do that mid-March. Nothing, again, this is just going on in my head. I've met with my superintendent think tank group that we've gotten together through all of this to talk about the return. We had a Google Meet yesterday on that. Probably the biggest thing that we did as a district in looking at digital learning was we created a digital learning coach position. And that was not my thinking. That was brought to me by Nicole and by Chelsea. And we put that out there, and we knew that we needed a very, very strong instructional person that had a great background in technology and technology platforms. And that person that was hired for that is Brittany Marshall, who was in-house, an elementary intermediate teacher. She has jumped in and probably David and the rest of the group, the most well-spent money that I could have done in the district, because she has stepped up. She's trained teachers. She's been available for parents. She's been available for students. She's done it all, and bringing different technological platforms to the surface for teachers. And that is one position that, I guess, since my chief financial officer is not here today, I will go to bat to keep that position for as long as I'm superintendent, because I have seen the value of it. Would even love to think about the possibility of getting a second one. But with that being said, that, well, I'll have to talk to the person that rules the money in the ship there for that. We have shown with we have created a data dashboard, and we check that data dashboard to see how kids with the Virtual Learning Academy are doing. And what we're seeing primarily is, even though, again, the majority of it is virtual, we're seeing that our kids are keeping up relatively well academically. It's, still, when the big factor is not the idea of a virtual learning academy versus in person, which is better. It's just the amount of time that we have with those kids, whether it be virtually or whether it be in person. So it's not necessarily technology that is, let's say, dropping our kids academically. It's just time, because we are seeing that kids that do participate with our virtual learning academy, they are keeping up. We were fortunate when I became superintendent. We were finishing up, I believe, Nicole, the one-to-one effort in the county. That was a part of our district strategic plan when I took over 5 years ago as assistant. And we were very, very thankful to be able to get the initial ESSER money that was focused really solely on technology and food service. Food service, we were doing fine. So we really turned our efforts to looking at what can we do in the area of technology, especially with the Virtual Learning Academy. And basically, Nicole headed up the effort to get MiFis to students in Henry County, because we do have dead spots. And I do know several different individuals traveled around to see where in the remote part of our county the access was not good. And those are kids that we provided, along with meeting the criteria for free and reduced lunch and so forth, to get those hot spots. So I think they did make a difference. I feel very, very solid as a small rural district with what we're doing with technology as a part of our Virtual Learning Academy. If anything good has come out of all of this mess, it's really the fact that I think that pushed districts to really kind of ramp up their thinking with technology. And I know, even though I felt like coming back to Henry County from a larger district, that, Nicole had one-to-one on the cusp, and it was right there where I can say larger districts have not had that total opportunity to push. And it cost us quite a bit of money, but that's the way to go. And we have learned that through the process. I think probably the biggest struggle, and maybe my colleague, Mr. Ford in Russell County, we're having the same issue with others with the amount of failure rates. And that's not necessarily related to technology versus in person, the lack of participation. I have parents that, yesterday, obviously up here, I had to call a snow day. They're hammering me on Facebook. They want the traditional snow day, let the kids play, let the kids do this, where I'm trying to assure them that, there's time during their work day to enjoy the weather. And, we're continuing with our MTI, but when you have a parent on Facebook say, my kid will not be doing MTI today, there you go.
Right.
So, but I mean, overall, Nicole, jump in anytime, because I know that there's things in your area that I will forget. We've been very pleased, at least with technology here, and we're continuing to move on. I know I see daily where some of my online teachers who chose to be the virtual learning teachers, where they're just sharing online platforms, Jamboards, anything that they come up with, we don't hide it. We're sharing with each other. So.
Yeah, well, Terry, you pretty much said it all. But yeah, I think Terry would also agree that just in general, our teachers have been throughout this whole process. So.
It was encouraging, a couple of things that you all were talking about, because we've always felt, and they've been called different things over the year, technology resource teachers, now digital learning coaches. That was always one of the best investments for professional development and training for teachers, because usually it's someone within the district that really have somewhat of a relationship with the teacher. They can work with them one-on-one in short periods of time versus just going to, sitting in a mass training session for it. It's always been a good, a hit. And we recognize, much like you have 2% prices, once a district does it, they realize how valuable that role is. That it's not just a short time, but in order to maximize, because this is a big investment. Technology is a big investment in a school district or any organization. And so they're always after, are we getting our biggest bang for the buck? And to get it biggest bang for the buck is people maximizing the use of that to whatever thing they're involved with. And ours is, making sure, our students are very well prepared when they leave our school system to go on and do whatever they do. They give them a good run and go at life, as my mom would always say. And so are we really maximizing that experience for them? And so this investment in the digital learning coaches has always been important to us. And I think what this has done for that percentage of teachers that may not have been power users of the technology, this has definitely expedited that. They've all, whether they wanted to or not, have become that. So it really is the system that we're taking a look at. The technology staff is now that they're coming back in person, really making sure that we have things in place that for the rest of the school year, beginning next school year, make it a good experience. The one question I would have before we go on to Russell County is, you started this virtual learning academy. Is once we get past this pandemic, and we're going to very soon here, as we're seeing the vaccines coming out, the rates drop, which is very encouraging to see. But there'll be a stickiness factor to this, won't there, where there'll be X percent that say, you know what, I like that virtual option. I want to keep that virtual option for X percent of the students. Now, it's not going to be like it was with a very high percent. We had nearly all at one time, and then when it was given a choice, it was 35% down to 20. But there'll be a percentage. If you were to kind of estimate what percentage of your parents you think and students really thrived in this environment and will want that choice going forward, at least for part of what the courses that they're taking. Is it 5%? Is it 10%? I know my peers across the nation are trying to figure that out as we're planning for the next school year.
I mean, that's a really good question. In talking with the superintendents that I did yesterday, just about, and I'll get to your question or your point, David. But one thing that I hadn't thought about as far as a superintendent about, starting back, however that may look, is the psychological effect that that's having on people that are out there either doing virtual learning or the idea of not being in person in school. I was talking with the superintendent of Hopkins County, Dee Ashby, and she brought that up, just the fact that she feels as if we don't attempt to start back, will that affect whether or not we ever do? So that's a little caveat out there, but the point that you make is a valid point on, come this spring, what parents or students may entertain the notion that I learned better online, because we're hearing that.
Yeah.
We're hearing some of our kids that would not perform in person are doing better in our academy, whereas some kids are, that would not normally want to be an in-person kid. They're saying, I've got to have an adult over me. I need to be in the building.
Yeah.
And that's the answers out of the mouths of our high school students.
Yeah.
And there's a really good possibility, and that's something that we haven't discussed, that how is this going to change?
Yeah, it's the thing. The promise of technology has always been the differentiated learning styles, and it's always been a case to where certain students learn better. And I've even said to my two, I have 4 children, and one really thrives in the online kind of world, and one would rather much face to face, and they struggled with taking courses that way. And so I've seen it, as a parent, firsthand. Now they're older. This was college levels courses, not necessarily K-12 courses, but one thrived and one did not like that. They liked the impersonal touch, and some just had to do with their personality. All right, Russell County, good to see you again. Like I said, I wish I was there in person. I had a good visit last time I was there at the district, but we'll do it virtual this time. So tell us what's going on in Russell County.
Sounds good. Thank you all. Just first, David, I just want to acknowledge Miss Judy Evans. She is always so accessible and so readily available to Russell County Schools. So hats off to you, Miss Judy. We appreciate you sincerely. Good to be on here, and a lot of things that Superintendent Price said, I can certainly echo. Our districts, we have about 3,000 students, a little bit less this year than we have in previous, and we've lost those students to homeschool. Hopefully we can capture them and get them back in for next school year. We've got over 70% of our students free and reduced lunch. We have been doing NTI on a paper packet for a number of years and continued that, although we almost went to a virtual platform, one of the CAN programs, last year when the pandemic started in March, but decided against it. We continue with paper packets throughout. But this summer we had intense training with Google Classroom. A lot of our teachers were already utilizing Google Classroom, and our much like Henry County, we hired a digital learning coach, and he was already a guru in his classroom with Mr. Chris Gobby. Has done phenomenal work for us, and so we captured him and we brought him on board as a digital learning coach, and doing an excellent job for us, and was already just so in tune to Google Classroom, all of its functionalities and everything. He's been a great asset for our district, and most importantly for our students and our families. But and much like Mr. Price said, the engagement piece is what we have suffered through the most as well. One of the exciting things that we've got going on in Russell County is we are building a new ATC. We secured a $5.7 million grant from the Work Ready Skills Initiative a few years ago that the state had out. And in part of that program is the computer science classroom. And so in that, besides being state of the art and great, but even we really wanted the flow of that building to show what the trade skills, to using that dated term, are really about. So there's a ceiling grid in part of that room, but there's no ceiling in it. So folks can see the ductwork, they can see the wiring, they can see the infrastructure within that building that really makes a building. Oftentimes you come into a classroom, you just see the walls and you miss all the other stuff that's inside that. We also have some mock-up walls where students can, learn to run the cable and do all that stuff like that and punch the holes. And so we're really, really excited about the building as a whole, but we're really excited about that digital opportunity to expand that with our students. Mr. Bell, and he can speak to this, he and his team have worked tirelessly, again, much like Henry County, our students and families suffered from some internet connectivity. Last mile internet certainly helped with that. But early on, we had met with Duo Broadband, our local internet provider for the most part, and they had offered a discount to families that did not currently have internet access, and they waived the installation fees. And they even set up a 1.5 megabyte line, and our tech folks went there and tested that to see how the platform would run on Google Classroom and things like that in case families went that lowest internet option. So we really appreciate our community partnerships and worked with those on getting internet access. And our other one was the MiFi devices with Bluegrass Cellular, and they have done great. And I know Mr. Bell and his team have worked tirelessly to lock those devices down. So, mom and dad, their phone cannot connect to that MiFi device.
Right.
Unfortunately, they can't. That's something they can't do, and we've had that, but they've got those devices locked down so tight that which is a lot of work. I hope folks appreciate all the extra work that our technology folks have went through, because those Chromebooks, when they bring them in, and for instance, we're hooking up a new family with a MiFi. Well, they need both of those devices, and they're locked down. It doesn't just say, here's your Chromebook and here's your MiFi device, now go off. It doesn't work like that. And not only that, but the troubleshooting Mr. Bell and his team has went through, just keeping the devices. We were not a one-to-one district. We were headed that way, taking baby steps, not because Mr. Bell had not been pushing it, but we weren't there yet and didn't have the finances really to fund that. Fortunately, with the CARES money, that came through. So all of our kids are one-to-one. Our students in K1 and 2 have iPads, and 3 up have Chromebooks, and we'll actually want to transition the lower grades to Chromebooks too. And we're going to strategically use some of this second round of CARES Act money to have plan that in a few years to replace some of those Chromebooks, so we can keep that going. But Mr. Bell, it's not out of the realm that he is doing home visits with proper PPE, where because he's troubleshooting, someone says, well, this Chromebook is not connecting at home and I cannot do it. So he and his team, they've just evolved and they've done those things, and say, well, we'll meet you and we'll do this and that. So that's just a great PR. It is, as far as the district and knowing folks. But at the end of the day, it's keeping those students working. Much like Mr. Price said, that absolutely want to touch on the engagement piece. It's not because our students don't have technology. They do. And we have taken care of the internet accessibility because they either have it with Duo Broadband, they have a MiFi device, or they're making that work. So at the end of the day, when folks are not doing it, is absolutely the engagement piece to where they are not being engaged. My conversation, we have our weekly admin meetings with principals and district leadership, and some of the families, a lot of the families, it is the same families that we've worried about always. And now they're not performing in the virtual sense as well. And you touched on those students that really excelling at the virtual level. And we've had that conversation with Senator Wise in a superintendent meeting. I look, probably not this session, but I look for there to be some virtual options kind of mandated, for lack of a better term, at the district levels going forward for students that need that option. We have operated what we've referred to as a Laker Success Academy for a number of years, where students operate on performance credits, and we've done that for our dropout prevention program. But that program has evolved over the course of the years, where students, if they needed an accelerated program, maybe because they were going to the Gatton Academy and they needed to take a class early, and they've had that option. And also for remediation or credit recovery, those students have kind of been ahead of the game, I guess, as far as utilizing an online platform. But that is the only group of students that are utilizing a CAN program, and we use Odysseyware for that. Otherwise, our students that are virtual or in person, and we're like Henry County, we're hybrid right now. A through L is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday's virtual for everybody, and M through Z on Thursday and Friday. And students have the opportunity to go virtual, but once they're in person, they're virtual, they can't hop back and forth, again, just like Henry County, because of numbers. And we hope to be able to increase that. But our students and our teachers are doing that simultaneously. So Kobe Lee's over here, a 12-year-old sixth grader on the couch in my office where he spent since a lot of his time since March. But if he were in person on this Thursday and Friday, he'll also be utilizing that Google Classroom and Chromebook in the classroom. And the teachers will try to touch both bases of the students just to keep the instruction simultaneously going with whether you're virtual or you're in person. We've talked about how that's going to change homeschool or homebound going forward. You know, our homebound teachers already been repurposed this year because what's the need of that when we can use that and they can be engaged in the classroom just as well. Versus, paper packets or going back and forth. So it is absolutely repurposed a lot of our thinking and has forced some thinking. I know, David, you referenced getting teachers out of their comfort zones. That's probably the proudest I've been of some of our faculty and staff, or some of those that have been hesitant, that we never really thought that they would not be able to. Maybe they're not technology leaders, but they have embraced it. They've done it, and just phenomenal. And again, our platform is Google Classroom, but the supplemental programs that they use to enhance students' learning and cooperation is just phenomenal. So our faculty and staff has just worked extremely well, and our admin staff and our principals as well. It's just everybody's been a part of this, and our school board has embraced it. That same parent that was on Facebook in Henry County, they emailed me this morning about this snow day. They did not get the answer they wanted in Henry County, so they sent me an email. And I tell folks, well, this was my take on that, and I may still do that at some point, give a snow day, but I don't think I will. And I told my admin staff is I want to say there's no need to do that because we can have we only call off school when we have to, and we don't have to call off school because we've got such a good virtual program. I think if we just cancel class, it kind of lets things down. And I get the idea, and there are a lot of superintendents that's doing that, and I don't question that. That's up to them and their community. But as Mr. Price said, there's time in the school day they can still get out and throw a snowball and enjoy it. So we have not had a traditional snow day yet, and as of right now, I don't think we will. Yeah.
Good for you. At 3:00 there's still going to be snow out there. I guarantee exactly you. And they can go till 8:00 or 9:00. And as you were mentioning, I was always hopeful. And some of these things, the pandemic, and I'm going to talk about here in a little bit about don't waste a good crisis. I've always thought that homebound students could be more engaged with technology. Someone, let's say they broke a leg, and there's a way they can still stay totally engaged with their class through technology, where before they really couldn't do that. So now this is really going to open up the mindset of folks of they can stay engaged. And as you're saying, on a snow day, and this is why NTI was originally put in place. We used to call it the Snowbound Project.
Yep.
People can still have school, and particularly it was for if you had a little place in the road that was iced over and didn't get any sun to it. But it's for days like this. So it really does showcase it. And, hats off to both of you. And I'm going to talk a little bit too about beyond the school campus. You both have done things to try to reach students beyond the school campus. We're also trying to do that as well as far as connectivity. I'm going to talk about the $3.2 billion initiative at the national level. That's about $64 million for Kentucky if you break out, just do 50 divided by that. So it's a lot of money to try to address this last mile beyond the school campus. And I would say this, for me, and this includes the military service that I was in. The past 11 months have been my proudest work. I'm the proudest of anything I've ever done over the past 11 months. And part of that is because all the work that we've been doing for 28 years put us in a position to put a viable option for in-person technology and also beyond the school campus technology in virtual instruction or remote instruction. It's not 100% perfect. We all know that. We've been all learning along the way. And there are some limitations to it as well. But definitely for me is to see things that was trying to get in place for decades, now accelerated. The mobile one-to-ones, that all these teachers now using it, and it's very high percentages, is something that we've been trying for quite some time, and it took a pandemic to do it. But as I say, don't waste a good crisis. But thanks for joining. I hope you guys can stay and just listen in for a little bit as we go on. And there may be some questions, for you or your team. But thanks for joining us this morning.
Glad to be here.
You know, I sent a note to our commissioner after the ice storm that happened last week, and he's from Kentucky. He's from Meade County. Even taught in Eastern Kentucky before becoming the commissioner equivalent in Iowa and going to Colorado. But I wanted to kind of educate him where we're at. But always when you get a new leader, is kind of educate him, where you're at, the services you have in place. And I gave the analogy back in 2009 to where we had, one of the worst ice storms we've had in this state, and it covered a good portion of the state. And not only was it an ice storm, but it kept people out of power and services, whether it be power and internet services, probably for 2 or 3 weeks. Some places were out without 2 or 3 weeks if people can go back to that time frame. And I told them the difference between that and what happened last week. We basically had one district that was out, and that's a good thing. And there's some things that have been done since 2009. Some of it, those weaker trees and limbs in 2009 came down, so they were kind of weeded out. I also saw people take preventative measures to where they were, even here where I live here in Woodford County, people are more willing to cut down limbs that may fall down on a line. So when you did get that next ice storm or bad weather or windstorm, it was less likely to take down the organization or the house or the organization. I also found new poles went up, particularly Western Kentucky was hit really hard in 2009. And those in Western Kentucky on here remember that, how bad that was. The poles that came down, even snapping poles. And so what was, they replaced those with brand new poles, probably better located poles and more of them. And I noticed the difference as I'm driving on the Western Kentucky Parkway, have family members out there, is how better the services, the internet service, it was almost immediately noticeable how much better it made. Also taking back people to 2009 is we had districts, it was optional then to have a disaster recovery service. And so those that had the Munis Disaster Recovery Service could run their payroll even though their entire district was down. Power, internet, it was down and down for weeks. And the reason that was a bad thing then, but it was a plus thing later on, because I was able to use that as leverage as we're talking about the plus sides of moving to cloud services. And you've heard me talk about, I know we have 2 superintendents on here, is, Kentucky is the pioneer and national leader in cloud-based services. There's nobody else that comes close to the wide range of services that we have are cloud-based. And I was able to use that the following year in 2010. We began and completed the cloud conversion for email, the first in the United States. Because that was so successful, we were able to start and complete the cloud conversion to all districts for the financial management system. And we've done all of our other systems and move them to cloud-based. So as you come up to things like NTI and NTI days and extended NTI and days like today, our services are all up. All of our cloud-based services are up. And as you're saying, there's no reason why not to continue on with the instructional services we have in the cloud, the administrative services, the communication services, all are a go. But back in 2009, we had none of that. And so we were shut down. But that disaster and crisis in 2009 helped me make the case for doing things different. So the next time that happened, and it's been a decade plus, we were much better prepared. And we didn't know that we were also preparing ourselves for once in a 100-year pandemic, which we're also the best prepared state as far as K-12 in the United States for all the things that we've had in place. Not saying it's 100% perfect, but I see where my peers are at, with starting the pandemic, even where they're at now. And Kentucky is far ahead of them in making things, and the technology we have is very much a viable option. So that didn't happen just anyone from KD. That was a collective effort of school districts joining us over these past 12 years, our vendor partners, our staff at the Office of Education Technology. That was a collective effort to make that happen. So I'm very proud of days like this, as even though it's a miserable day to be out there as far as if you're trying to drive or do something. But maybe as a kid, and at 3 o'clock is a good day to be out there. You can sled and do all the things that you want to do. But I'm prepared. I'm really proud that we can do both on a day like this. We can have a full day of instruction, And we can also go out and have fun on it. And back in 2009, it was either one or the other. So, I applaud all those that helped us put the right things in place all these years to help today be a good thing. And, we're in the middle of another crisis, have had two massive waves of funding, the CARES 1.0 funds, and now another wave of funds that is nearly 5 times that amount. I call it CARES 2.0. It's called CRISIS, it's called a lot of different things. But also beyond that one, there's a new funding source, $3.2 billion, to provide low-income families internet access beyond the home, or beyond the school campus, I should say, to their home. So I'm going to talk about these funding sources. So that's the next topic that I have up, and I know Mike Lettingham, you can join in here. We're going to spend some time on the money part of it. So if the money part of it bores you, this is not to be very interesting, but I got to tell you, anyone in an education technology leadership position should be interested in money, because without money, you can't get certain things done. The saying is, a dream without money is a hallucination. So, make sure that you have the money part. You can have the dream, but make sure you have the money part so you're not having hallucinations. And so we got to talk about the money part, because that's what makes certain things happen. You got to be very, savvy and knowledgeable. And I would also say you got to sit at that big table and force your way to that big table, sitting there with the superintendent, chief financial officer, chief academic officer, when they're talking about the money and the money available. Because if you don't count on it to be taken care of. Make your case, make it, in a very logical way. But I'm going to lay out, the different funding sources that are available to you, and and the kind of case that you may want to make as you meet with your superintendent and chief financial officer going forward. So let's talk about the CARES 2.0 funds. This is about $923 million worth of funds. And we've, at the KD level, we've been working on, there's a 10% of that money that could be held up at the KD level to do shared services for districts. And for those that remember, from the technology point of view, we did that. We got a portion of the CARES 1.0 funds and did some really things that districts applauded us on at the end of the school year. Because end of the calendar year, all districts are required to give us their feedback on what things went well and not well. And definitely we got, some pretty good high fives of the things we put in place. One of those things was relay services. Phil Coleman's going to talk about that today. And it goes back to, the internet content management system working no matter where it's at and whether internet service are using beyond the school campus or on the school campus. That was an important thing. As with so many people that were remote, that if it's a school issued device, whether it be a tablet or laptop, it's still followed what the district had identified for appropriate internet content, no matter where it was at and no matter what internet service it was using. We also instituted online registration. And I foresee that being a pretty big hit. Once people saw, well, why do we have to bring everyone in physically? Why can't we do this way ahead of the school year and let them come online? So that was really well received of what we put in place with it. And there's several other things that we've done with that I think were good spend of that money. And we also have, so now we have this 2.0 round of it. So there's $923 million. KD agency could keep up to 92 million of that. Keep not just we couldn't use for any of the KD agency really, or a sliver of a sliver of a sliver. But mainly, what are good shared services that we could offer to school districts? And we went through that. All the KD offices went through that, much like we did CARES 1.0, making our case to the commissioner and to others, our peers, our C-level peers around us, is here's what we think would be a good spend of that money. And all the offices did that, including ours. And I'll tell you the ones that have been so far given the thumbs up. This is not a finalized list. So our commissioner, Novison being the superintendent's webcast, that's I'm trying to remember when that is. I don't know if it's today or tomorrow. We'll be talking about a little bit more. But also part of that's a little bit different this time is there's going to be a larger portion of the portion that KD could keep that's going to be available to districts. But they got to do X, Y, and Z to be eligible for that. So if you break out the amount of money that is beyond the 10%, let's say that's 90%, that's about $1,300 per student. if you take a look, that's a big amount of money. Now it's got to be spent by September 2023, and it can go back and pay for things going back to March of 2020, not 2021, but March of 2020. So big amount of money there, and let's say it's around $50 million. That'd be like $75 per student. That would be available to districts if they did X, Y, and Z with their portion of their CARES 2.0 money as an incentive to kind of do some things that are more direct instruction based. So that's what we saw. So there was a portion that was remaining that went there. There's somebody kind of like a agreement, an assurance that the districts are doing X, Y, and Z, and they'll get like $75 a student. It's nowhere near $1,300 a student, but it's a good chunk of money, additional chunk of money that will motivate districts to go in that direction. So for our portion of the money, the OET portion of the money, the thing so far that's got a green light. And we knew this because all the new devices being bought, especially mobile devices being bought by districts, and also the power use of those, increasing the number of teachers that were using that, now coming back into the school system, maybe at 80-20 right now, and maybe as a 95% next year, or something like that, is we want to make sure that there was a good experience with internet bandwidth through our services, that as students were coming back, there wasn't a choke point there. And as you all know, as I always tell any group, the best moneymaker of anything we do in Kentucky state government is when we put it into the KETS internet services. It is because we get a 3 to 4 bang for the buck, because we spend that to provide internet services for all 171 districts. We being KDE, we get that money back. We send it to you all. You match it, so there's a doubling of that money, and you can also spend on E-rate eligible items or buy some technology device directly. For example, a laptop or a tablet. So you get a 3 to 4 bang for the buck in spending that money. So that we did get approval for that, for a portion of that 10% to beef that up. And to be honest with you, and I should have said this at the beginning, the legislative session, we had listed that as a priority of increasing the KETS funding and the KIN funding in our baseline. But when the pandemic hit in the last session, and our board had made it one of their top priorities, it kind of wiped that out because everybody was just trying to survive for a year. And so a year's worth of budget was approved, and they're right back in legislative session approving another year. And to be honest with you, now that all this huge amount of federal money, and the legislators are very well aware of it, is there's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to get any kind of raising of any kind of baseline of KETS or KIN. And that obviously that will be a big effort in 2022 or 2024. But legislators, it was a no-go. So folks are aware of how can we maximize the money that's available. So we really went hard. Our office is very top priority for the portion of the money was to try to do something about our internet services to districts and make sure they were appropriately, and in good shape beginning of school year, but also because we know the amount of money that brings in and can bring into a district as far as offers of assistance and the things they can spend it on. So first of all, we got that is, so far as a thumbs up. That's not a finalized, but we met yesterday with the KD leadership team, and I feel good about that one. The other one that we got approval for, and this is our work with the other office, is our digital learning coaches. That was one of our top priorities, always been one of our top priorities as far as our mentoring and working with and encouraging districts to get a digital learning coach. That was also the Office of Continuous Improvement, led by Kelly Foster, their top priority. They saw the importance of that, along with our design labs that we'd work with on districts about how to maximize this digital resources within their districts. That also got a big thumbs up on our CARES 1.0 funding. And so that was also approved for this round. So our two biggest in Office of Education Technology that were approved were the addressing the bandwidth that's needed coming out of the district and making sure all these new devices that were bought have a good experience within the school building, as they leave the school building and come out to the internet, and also the digital learning coaches. Now, there are a good number of items that were not approved, and mainly it's because of the awareness that there's a large percent of amount of money going to districts that previously we bought that the district would have the choice of buying. And so that would be things like, we're going to pay up for, out of the first round of CARES 1.0 money, online registration for Infinite Campus. Up to September of our staff had to remind 2022. I think that's what that money goes up to. And the proposal we made was to pay for it for another 2 years. But because districts will really have this amount of money, they would have the choice. And therefore, if you're not the person that kind of leads that, that effort within your district, make sure they're aware that at this time where districts are kind of talking about with this round of money, which is like say close to 5 times more that's going to them, is, after September 2022, is perhaps using that to also pay for online registration. Also, most of you are familiar with our Infinite Campus system. We bought Campus Learning. Does a lot of positive things, including those that use Google Classroom, taking those results and putting them in Infinite Campus and making that link. And that's a service that we bought up to September 2022. Obviously, we will stop paying for that at that time, and the districts can use their portion of the CARES money to pay for it beyond that time frame. Another big item that we had identified that, and I hope districts do this, besides the digital learning coaches, which we think is important for you to fund with this money, and when this money runs out, the CARES money, CARES 2.0 money, your all's portion is keep on doing that. But also a network health check, and I know Phil Coleman's talk about the importance of that. As all these new devices are coming in your district, all these new services, and now you got power users of teachers, but also say you have power users of students. My daughter is a kindergarten teacher in Christian County, and they use Microsoft Teams, and their students noticed she changed her background to a different background. They said, "How do you do that?" And so she was like, can kindergartners grasp this? You got to hit the three little, look at those 3 little dots and click on here. All of them did it. All of them did it without their parents' help. And then now they're playing around with it. So now you got power users of this technology, even down to the kindergarten level, with all of them having, for the most part across the state, access to the device in some kind of capacity, and definitely her classroom did, as long as the other 3 of our family that teach, they all had that at different grade levels, and so they're going to be power users of that when they come back in. So it'd be a good, even though you put a 30-lane highway coming into a district at our KD Internet Hub, if there are things that are jammed up within the district, it's not going to be a good experience. And the analogy I use a lot that you're all familiar with is you can have, a 200 gig pipe coming to your house. But if you have a really poor router at your house, it can significantly impact the quality of performance to where you think you may not have anything barely coming out beyond a dial-up. Because typically when you buy a service, and most of you know this, when you buy a router through a company, that's usually a very inexpensive one, maybe one that's end of life, they're trying to get a little bit more life on. And so those things go down very frequently, and they're usually the choke point. And so we always recommend to folks that, much like if they're trying to improve their internet service at their home, take a look at that router, and maybe if you're buying that through a service provider, ask them to upgrade that thing, or just go buy one yourself. But also within your school districts is having an analysis done, and this is the plus side security wise too, as you're familiar with. We have had more attempted cybersecurity attacks. We already had 4 billion on average every year, and what we saw since the pandemic is a 10 times increase of that. And it's just not K-12; it's across country, but they were particularly targeting K-12. We could see that is really making sure your security is rock solid. Your cybersecurity, along with your cyber safety is rock solid, and performance. And so we'd really encourage you to take a look and make your case to your superintendent, CFO, chief academic officer should be interested in that. Principals should be interested in teachers, and make sure that's a good experience when they come back as you're adding all those services that you have on there. The Kentucky Virtual Library was another item that we had looked at. We have about 58% of the districts that buy the Kentucky Virtual Library services, 42% that don't. So those 42% that don't, this could perhaps be a an opportunity for you to acquire that service, for the rich amount of resources that it has available onto at least, much like the digital learning coaches, if you haven't used it or used it in a while, get a good flavor for what it is and the services that it offers. So those are that is the CARES money. Then there's the GEAR money. Last time there was $30 million in GEAR money, and it was focused on two things, feeding students and technology. I don't know what the priority will be for this one. I don't think it's near as much. I think this one's $20 million, but I don't think the priority is going to be on the technology like it was before, particularly the remote and distance learning. And so probably one of the best opportunities for that was the CARES 1.0 money, but nothing saying that I don't know where that's going with it. But also there's a $3.2 billion allotment, and I know Tim Sizemore listened to a webinar. I think it was February 12th. Today's the last day for comments for folks that are running that program. This is a federal program. Like I say, that's about, if you divide that by 50, you got $64 million for our state. And this is really for low-income families. And the struggle with I think everyone's recognized one of the biggest inhibitors of internet service is not necessarily the lines; it's the money to pay for that service by low-income families. And it's really difficult, and it's it's discouraging for some and humiliating for some to say, "Hey, I'm low income. I want to get X, Y, and Z." We see that with free and reduced lunch. You see it at the elementary school level, and even middle school, where X% on free and reduced lunch, and all of a sudden when they get into high school, they're not, because they don't want to claim it, even though they're very eligible for it. You see that factor throughout, and you see it. And there's been a federal program called the Federal Lifeline program. It's been in place for a long time, and it helps low-income families, gives them about $10 a month to help pay for internet service. But the sad part about that, even though that service has been available for a long time, only 20% of those eligible for it ever apply or get it. So it tells you 80% don't know about it, or it's such a long process to get it, or there's an embarrassment factor. Hey, listen, I don't want to have to provide a lot of proof that I'm poor, because and that's just not the way I work. So I think the part of this that, as they go down the line, is what's going to be the way you verify that someone is low income. That is a pretty simple way. That's not a very bureaucratic way. Obviously, the Lifeline program, while a good intended program, there are some things about it that you only get 20%. That's a problem. And you're not hoping that going forward with this $3.2 billion that you have another 80% that would be eligible. So part of the role of everyone is probably, first of all, whenever they come up with their guidelines, they get finalized, and they're not finalized. And I don't think they gave a date by. I know we have Tim Sizemore. I didn't, he listened in. I don't know if they have a date by that they feel that they'll have some structure to it and guidance to it. But today is the last day of giving comments of anyone that wanted comments to it. And this was just not K-12. This is all these companies about how they think it should work and not work, and a good number of the companies said, we already have, as mentioned earlier by our districts, there are discount programs that vendors have already been doing for low-income families, and from those internet service providers, large and small, they're going, hey, listen, don't make this super bureaucratic. We have a really simple way, a non-humiliating way, a non-way that they got to give a bunch of paperwork that they're low income. And obviously, you're all familiar with low income with free and reduced lunch. Is there, how can a parent, show that they were eligible for free and reduced lunch, or someone in the household has another part of eligibility is they're been unemployed and there's a significant drop in their income from one year to the next. How do they go about doing that so it's not a huge bureaucratic process, that it allows someone to say, hey, listen, I'm eligible for this service, and they can apply directly to the telcos, and the telcos are also aware of it. And so they're aware that they can get discount money, from out of this $3.2 million worth of money. So therefore, they can turn around and offer significant discounts to parents. And the amount of money is about $50 of service per month, plus buying an up to $100 device that the little hotspot devices, up to $100 to pay for that device. They can be a lot more expensive than that, but they can be around that $100 figure. There's going to be that, just to talk about that is there's a significant amount of money. Hopefully for the last mile beyond the school campus, internet access for parents, and it's just not for K-12 parents really. It's anyone in a low income situation. Is how do we make them aware of it? Everybody aware of it. How can it be made so it's not bureaucratic and it's a big, it's a humiliating thing or soul crushing thing of them, all the stuff they got to provide and to get that service. I hope it's done in a simple way. But I want to make sure you're aware. A lot of you have done a lot of good work on the internet access beyond the school campus. This perhaps could be another option. Now, the downside of it that I'm aware of from reading about it at a high level is, unlike the CARES 1.0 money and 2.0 money that has identified end dates, this one does not. And basically they've said, when the money runs out. And so, part of that discussion is, can we get a heads up when that money is getting ready to run out? So, it's not 100% down to how they're going to do that. And can they give people a guaranteed amount before entering into that agreement that at least got this service for this amount before the money runs out? So it's not 100% perfect what I've written. And I, if you have something to add to that, you can raise your hand and that you think would be worth to educate folks on it, or just put it in the Go Soapbox comments, and we'll take a look at it. Take a look at it from there. I think I've hit on the big chunks of money there that are available. I know KETS, Mike, are you available to talk about our KETS second offer and E-rate?
Well, the second offer is in process. $7 per ADA is in process. I don't know if districts would have seen that yet or not, but School Facilities Construction Commission is certainly processing those, and those should be coming to the district. So some of you may have seen them. I haven't checked on it in the last couple of days about whether they actually have went out yet or not, but I know they're processing them. And just to remind folks, obviously we reduced the first offer from our original projected amount a little bit because we were trying to identify what our overall dollar amount was going to be for offers for the entire year. We will make up the difference in the third offer. So it's likely that we'll get up to a total of $21 for the entire year as far as offers of assistance when we make up the difference in that third offer, which will be in a couple of months. So anyways, the second one's in process. Regarding E-rate, the E-rate filing application window is obviously still open, scheduled to close March 25th. We don't have any word on that being extended yet. I would still anticipate that it may get extended some amount of time. I think we'll learn that by the 1st of March, if it will or will not. But regardless, we've got a plan as though it won't. So make sure you're on top of that. I think next Thursday is the last day that you can file a 470 if you're doing any kind of a competitive process, which would require a 470 to be posted. You will want to get that in place. I will make sure that we confirm that date, but I'm sure it's within about a week or less that you have to get that 470. It's essentially 30 days ahead of the closing window. So I think that, again, I'm not looking at the calendar, but I think it may be Thursday. So, but anyway, so make sure you're on top of that. David, I can go ahead and hit on contract status if you want me to. Yeah. We've got a few contract RFP type activities that were procurement activities we're keeping an eye on. School Community Nutrition is continuing to work on a point of sale procurement RFP to establish a contract for that. That is continuing to proceed forward. So we anticipate hearing something on that being finalized quite shortly. We have the teacher certification system that we've mentioned several times. That is a continuing procurement process, RFP process that again is proceeding forward, and we anticipate that reaching a point of being able to move into an active mode here shortly as well. And then we have our networking products and services contracts, which I'm hopeful most every district is watching for, so that you can, because that obviously is something that you have to be able to reference as part of your E-rate applications that you'll be working on between now and again March 25th. So again, those are pretty much on track the way I have described them each time I've spoken to them. And I still feel comfortable that you're going to have those the resulting contracts from those in a time that allows you to do your E-rate applications for those. And obviously, if the E-rate window gets extended, it'll make it even easier. But if it doesn't, I think we'll still be fine. But I know we've encouraged, I know our field services KE group have also encouraged all districts to have the necessary prep and planning done so that they can act on those quickly and be able to get those E-rate applications completed. So I think that's what I got on those, David.
Okay. I'm going to ask that I'm not just spending a lot of time on this, but for Ddi's update, I just want to mention there's a part I mentioned before. There's this, let's say it's $15 million that districts can also get out of the ESSER 2.0 funds, and this is the portion that normally, that's the KD portion that KD could keep, but obviously we're talking about giving a large portion of that to districts if they do X, Y, and Z. I want to give you a heads up, and this is probably something we can talk about for an hour, and if those that want to stay on after we end, we want to talk about it, we can. Things that will not be included as part of that 85% so far. Really, if you and the commissioners don't go over this about what the focus of it, and it's kind of like reminds me of grant programs to where they want to make sure a huge portion of the grant is not spent on buying computers. And sometimes you have grant programs for that, but it's really to make sure it's doing some other things. And so the buying the devices, even though the ESSER funds, all the ESSER funds that district gets can go toward this. To buying devices and all the things they could with ESSER 1.0 is in order to be eligible for this, it's like 85-15, and there's 85%, 15%. So 85% of the district's portion of their ESSER funds that they get out of this $823 million, needs to go toward X, Y, and Z. And there are some things that are not part of X, Y, and Z that the remaining 15% of the district's allocation of $823 million can go toward it and still count. But they go above that, then they're not eligible for it. And so some items, just to give you a heads up, that will be considered not eligible for that 85% are in devices. And this is as of this morning, could change, in a half hour, as most of the things during the pandemic. Things like the computers, mobile laptops and tablets and smart boards or digital whiteboards, I should say, projectors. So the in devices like that. Also, really, the intent is not to refresh all the network infrastructure within a district, but if you need additional needs because of all these end devices that have come within your district, then that would be, at this time, something that would be eligible to get. And the other thing is, with the 15% and also the money you would get with $75 per student, you could actually buy, end devices if you wanted to, but it's just not to be part of the 85%. So that's an item that you probably have to hear 10 times to get. But I want to make sure you were introduced to that you're the first time you've not heard it. The hotspots is also not going to be part of that 85%. There's $3.2 billion that can be spent on that. The 15% can be spent on along with some other funds. And so I just want to give you a heads up that may be coming out soon in the superintendent's webcast. And once again, if you want to talk about a little bit more, you can. Ddi, data systems update.
Good morning. A few things. Last week, a new campus instructional tools became available for teachers, and we had put a question out in the soapbox, so I don't think we need to pull it up because we haven't gotten a lot of feedback. We have a mix of folks that are either involved in Infinite Campus or just really not. But we're interested in hearing what they think of the new assignment tool editor, the resource option. There's the ability to communicate, some new communication tools in the system. So at this point, teachers do have the option of turning it off, and it didn't want to be disruptive in this time, but there are tools that are available that will add additional functionality. So please, as you hear anything on that, please let us know as we go forward there. March the 2nd through the 4th, Infinite Campus is going to have training online. They did this before, and it went really well. It was strong training. This is data days and master scheduling. It's a fairly inexpensive way of getting folks trained. A lot of folks trained in your district without a lot of money because you pay one cost and everybody's included. So again, we had a question on this. We've gotten some feedback, but it's obvious we've got a lot of folks that don't know whether they're participating in this or not. We also have a new potential for a new PEBT program. We've had those in the past where we've been able to help families out with students in schools that would have normally gotten free and reduced lunch if they're still, virtual. So there's a potential for a new program. Kentucky's application, to my knowledge, has not been approved yet. So more information will go out through the food service officers when that information is available. Really, right now, it's a good idea to just encourage the staff responsible to really make sure that any free or reduced lunch applications that should be processed have been processed and that the household addresses are correct, because those two items will be critical, especially for the non-CEP schools where it's dependent on having that free and reduced lunch application to be able to get the money. So David's already mentioned the ESSER funds. We have done some great work. We've had a lot of districts take advantage of the online registration and the campus learning. KDE will continue to pay for that for one more year. So, and do start the conversations locally about extending those beyond that with some of the new money that's coming out. We do have some money left over if you need to further refine your online registration for the upcoming year for training, or if you didn't take advantage of one of these opportunities last year, but you want to take advantage knowing you've got another, you could potentially pay for 2 more years with this new money that's coming out. So keep that in mind and take advantage of that. If you do have questions, let us know. We're glad to help. And Infinite Campus has been a great resource for helping districts get on board with both of those offerings. We do have some additional training that'll be coming up with user group trainings and KDE training this spring. Those dates will be released soon. And the school report card, we're finalizing the 2021 requirements. So if you have anything, this is kind of the last shout out for anything you'd like to see differently or highlighted in the school report card, please let us know. Financial transparency will be released in the spring, but other than that, it's pretty quiet at this point in time. That's all I got, David.
Thanks, Dee Dee. Can we bring up the 2 GoSubBots questions, question 1 and 2? One of these was one that you didn't have, Dee Dee. So whoever's doing that, our staff, can we bring up?
Yep. David,
yeah.
I got it.
All right.
You should start to see it now.
Okay. Yeah. So this was about, and this is just a, I know you all just heard about this, but with the percentage of money you think will be spent on technology. Great. Yep. Good stuff there. And let's go to question 2, Marty, please.
Yep. Looks like we still have responses coming in, which is great. We want to encourage those.
Dee Dee, the Infinite Campus tool has a way, and I know we're looking at how can we do it for data analytics with, the mental emotional wellness of students, which I think is an important part of it. Come back. Can you talk about that a little bit? And you're on mute, Dee Dee. Sorry, I brought you in after you muted, so sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. The campus instruction tool allows for some capturing of information on how students are feeling the day, and that I'm not sure how many districts are actually taking advantage of it. At this point in time, it's just really a teacher tool, nothing more than that. The teacher can capture that information if they choose to do so. It's not lumped into the early warning system or any type of other indicators, and that's something we've talked about exploring to see if there would be some way to further enhance our early warning system. As you know, KDE partnered with Infinite Campus to create that early warning system initially. And we have a lot of interest in continuing to refine it and to improve upon it. It was originally just available for the high schools, and now it's available for middle and elementary schools. So those early warning indicators can really help students, districts, pinpoint students that may need additional help interventions to keep them on track. So, continuing to explore what options are available and what data we could use on that. One of them is the, mental and well-being of the student.
Yes. Thanks. And I hear that, when we talked about the survey that I sent you a link to that we talked about last month of the commissioners, keep, stop, start. it's a lot. Part of that was you can see the concern about students beyond the academic side is just this emotional and mental health, and all of us that have been involved with this, and trying to get a good grasp on that as well as we're trying to address them as they come back in the school buildings this summer and beginning next school year. And definitely, we're going to take a look at some things that we can do at the OET level to help out with that. I want to make you aware of that.
I want to correct one thing I said. I said that the campus learning already had that in. I know we've had some training on it. It's not quite available yet, but it's expected to be available soon, where they can say how they're feeling at the during the class.
Yep. Thank you, Dee Dee. And we want to take advantage of that, of something analytics-wise that can help schools. Phil Coleman, are you with us to give us an update on the Leray project? And there's a couple other items you have as you're floating above our Sauer building in Frankfurt did not get any snow today because it's always sun shining there.
I'm in the kids helicopter, so I'm just kind of looking out now. This is just a picture we took back in the summer, actually.
Well, the helicopter is turned sideways, or it's going headed toward the ground, so you may want to turn that thing here pretty soon.
Yeah, that's for sure. So you talked a little bit about the internet health, David, and I just wanted to touch base on that just for a second. From a state perspective, we look at the network constantly. In fact, we run a report every night that we look at the following morning just to make sure that districts have a healthy WAN connection. And we've been able to identify some things way early in order to get AT&T or the last mile provider there to the school district to get them to work on something. So that's something that we continuously do. And, we're hoping that we can put together a package. We're going to try to do that with maybe our new network providers that are on contract coming up soon that Michael's talking about. So, but I think, just looking at the district network also is a very important piece, because you have schools connected, and many of you have lots of schools connected. So in the case of Jefferson County, they actually have as many schools connected as we have school districts connected. So the other thing I wanted to mention is the Ddos attacks. I know I said something out on Friday to our EdTech leaders across the state, but when we look at the things that we have put in for to protect our school district from these Ddos attacks, we continuously try to improve that. So we don't talk about that a lot anymore, because it's not that we're not getting attacked, it's that we're not really feeling those. And so I'll give you a really good example. In the 12-month period from January 2020 to December 2020, we had 58 district attacks. And out of that 58 district attacks, if we had not done mitigation, if we did not have that service in place, that equals to 2 days and 6 hours of downtime for school districts. And normally these not only affect school districts, but they affect the whole state at the same time. With the mitigation that we've been able to put in place and make improvements on throughout the years, that equals to 9 minutes now. From 2 days and 6 hours to 9 minutes of downtime that districts actually felt spread across those 58 districts. So, as David said, we've been, even though the pandemic has, kind of put us in a different spot a little bit, we have continually tried to provide the, good services and internet health improvements and security measures that we've put in place for school districts. So, and, it was just this time last year, David, that we were talking about that we had, chosen Relay to be our next standard for internet content management, filtering, and blocking. And we didn't know that this pandemic was going to happen. We didn't know that we were going to shift to, all of these devices, student Chromebooks and teacher workstations being remote. But, the timing was just really, really good on that because we had that in place and in motion before we actually, had the pandemic kind of hit us. So since the pandemic started in March and schools have gone to NTI 1, NTI 2, and virtual learning in different formats, districts have they have implemented Relay on student and teacher devices, 500,000. That's 500,000. So they're well on their way as they work with Lightspeed daily to get all of their devices loaded with Relay so that they can have the cloud-based internet filtering that we call Relay and not the on-premise stuff, which they wouldn't have that for the most part if it wasn't for the Relay. So then that's what we call part one. Part two is actually doing the infrastructure move or the hardware move from an inline state to an out-of-line state. And we are putting that project together. We've worked with 3 school districts so far and done a proof of concept. And then from the proof of concept, we're going to develop our project plan, and then we'll do some pilots. And keep in mind, the proof of concept is actually us testing out different, kind of technologies and strategies to make sure that we put a good project in place. And then the pilots are to test that process. So we're going to do about 3 to 5 proof of concepts, and then we're going to move to a pilot stage, and then we'll move to a full-blown project on that sometime probably over the summer. So that project is going well, and we're doing the same thing for KDE that school districts are doing for their teachers and students that are working virtually. My helicopter's getting a little bit, get a little cold.
You're doing good. You're doing well, Phil. Doing well, Phil.
What else did you have for me to update?
No, that's fine. If you went through if you went through our listing of 5 and 6, so did you cover that the way you wanted it?
I think so, yeah. I think so.
Okay. Well, thank you. Appreciate that. Let me pause there for those that are watching our Go Soapbox. I think the top thing, just taking a look at it, has to deal with passwords. And Bob Hackworth's going to talk about that. Is there anything else, those that are monitoring that for me, that we need to address? We are aware, and Phil said this morning, because we keep up with the network pretty closely. We had 9 districts, particularly in Eastern Kentucky, that came up as they were not showing up. We couldn't tell if it was power or internet line down. It was Carter, Elliott, Floyd, Jackson, Johnson, Knott, Owsley, Pike, and Wolf were down as of this morning, Phil. I know that was there. So we know there's X number that are down with power. My mom lives in Johnson. I haven't got to talk to her yet this morning and see if they got their power back up or not. So I think that's.
So it looks like a combination of power and several fiber cuts.
Yeah.
So there's more than one, I think, is what we're.
So it could be that actually these 9 could actually have power, but there's a fiber cut there along the Mountain Parkway. Bob Hackworth, let's talk about passwords. This is something that was hot on our radar screen to get completed. Phil, you have to slide your little thing over, Bob, so we can see you.
Well, I was waiting to make a dramatic entrance, David.
Yeah. You show me how to do that, because you showed me the tool that did that, so I've added that to mine. But almost everything, and the thing that I've just been proud of is everything that we had already planned to do. We did it, plus all the pandemic stuff. But one item that we waited on and paused on was the passwords and getting them done by X date, which is concerning to me because of all the full court press of the cyber attacking that's going on. So let's talk about the passwords, Bob, and trying to get that back going.
You bet, David. And I really want to thank everybody for not letting this drop, 100%. I know everyone's had a ton of stuff on their plates, just trying to keep school going and everything. And I really appreciate that. As I said I would at the very beginning of our effort to upgrade K-12's passwords in Kentucky, I've gone back in and looked at some of the data that I have access to, which which isn't going to be 100% accurate, but it's the best that I have, and decided it was probably a good time to kind of dive back into this topic. We still have a lot of districts who have some staff, and we have some districts who haven't, I think, moved on this really at all, again, because they've been busy with other stuff, to try to strengthen the passwords of all of our staff out in the districts. KDE, as David, as you mentioned, we did this last spring. We went through it last spring, right as the pandemic hit. We, took a couple of months, and then we went ahead and implemented our stronger password stuff at KDE while everyone was off-site. So today I'm really going to try to do two things. I want to, one, identify that we're going to move from June 30 of 2020 being a done point to June 20 of 2021 being the point where we get all of our staff in Kentucky K-12 to that stronger password policy, if you will. And then I also want to know and better understand what issues you in your district are facing that are in the way. Now, I don't want you to put so much detail in there that it might give the wrong people too much information. But if you want to talk with your KE, if you want to get in touch with me and send messages to me, that's awesome. I just want us to kind of get over whatever hump you happen to be on to get to the other side of this so that we can finally get these stronger passwords in there. David, as you mentioned, no one is giving us a break in terms of cybersecurity. We're definitely still getting people out there from all over the world, from the United States, and they're looking for ways to get in our districts, whether that's guessing a weak password or using a computer to crack passwords. And so this is just one of those things that we still definitely need to do. It definitely hasn't gone down in importance over the past year, so we need to move this forward. I've been looking at some of the data, and I'm not going to get into details of that, but it does sort of look like we have about less than 50% of our districts have gotten most of their staff over the hump. And that doesn't mean they don't have passwords, don't have good, decent, I guess, okay passwords for a few years back, but I don't want to say that they're where they need to be. They need to move forward into the requirements that we put out there. I've talked with the KEs about this, and they'll be getting in touch with you to get more information and to find out if the data that I have are correct or if the data I have need to be updated. So that's going to happen soon. And then we're going to be trying to figure out what we can do to help. And that's why I want your feedback today and over the next couple of days to see what we can do to help get you over that hump. The question in Go Soapbox is a good one, because I guess last month or earlier we'd mentioned that we'd be able to provide a password notification email service for a lot of districts if you wanted it. We're still kind of working on that to make sure that we can provide that default notification, but at the same time allow districts that want to opt out of that to do their own notification. So we're just making sure that we don't break something that a district wants while we implement something that other districts want. And so that's the status of that. And so, David, if you have anything to add on to that, or if we've got any questions, I'd be happy to take those right now. Otherwise, I'm good.
Bob, if you could do this, if once we finish here, we're talking around 11:30, is to stay on and just talk about the passwords a little bit more.
Sure.
And I saw one of the questions that came out. What are the things I was talking about, the 85% thing? So I'll talk about that again. I did like to comment. I am super proud of our EdTech staff, superhuman work pivoting to virtual learning, NTI, and helping students close the internet gap. It was superhuman. And that's why I say I'm pretty proud of my military service, but this is the proudest part of my work. The past 11 months, what we did, kept on doing, plus the preparation it took to be there. So that was worth it. Marty, you're getting ready to say something. Go ahead, jump in there, Marty.
Well, I was going to say absolutely continues to be superhuman work. and I a couple points I'll add on to that, David, is, we've been all throughout the state collecting feedback from districts on not just surviving but thriving through this work, and it's a nice compilation of exactly that point, with great scenarios where our folks have continued to step up to provide great learning experiences for kids, and I think Superintendent Price and Superintendent Ford represented that as well. Bob, I did want to make sure that the discussion question that we had in Go Soapbox, and David, I'm not sure if we want to bring it up right now, but it's about the 3 specific things, of roadblocks to complete staff password policy upgrades. There's some really good input.
Well, let's do this. This during our bonus time. Let's go through those so we can end 11:30. And I do want to give you a chance. So we're going to talk about the passwords a little bit more in depth and what we learned there. A little bit more about the CARES money that I talked about that. And then, Marty, I want you to finish up on, the items. Just make sure folks are aware of the new infographic out there with the link and a couple other documents.
Okay. So I'll do that, David.
Oh, look at this. Look at this. All right.
Well,
right.
if one thing about our infographic that's important is, again, as Superintendent Price and Superintendent Ford represented, that it's really important for our communities to know what we've been able to do and pull off. Now our infographic does not represent everything across the state, but we try to pinpoint directly to some big deal items, some items that turn into be very good conversation points. So on the Kentucky Department of Education website, if you go to the KETS Master Plan area, you're going to find under Surveys and Results, which is Appendix B, this is always where our most up-to-date infographic is. And I wanted to point that out in a conversation with the superintendent earlier this week. The question was, hey, that infographic I've used before, is there a new one? And so the answer is yes, there's always a new one. We keep it up to date. We do this twice a year. So this is the January 2021 edition. And there are some new items. And David, I know that in the past we've taken some time to point some things out. Obviously, student to digital device ratio representing over 1 million student and staff computers is important. We have a representation on access beyond the school campus with internet and digital device. That's important. We do have 10 school districts that that currently today do not have a one-to-one or bring your own device strategy. And so we want to work directly with those 10 school districts. And then, David, I'll point out another really nice representation. And it actually was stated by both superintendents this morning, but nearly 4 or 5 teachers report having sufficient access to instructional technology. And now, thankfully, just over 4 and 5, 82% have access to a part-time, full-time, part-time or full-time digital learning coach. And so that is just awesome. The final thing that I wanted to point to is represented here, not just.
That's pretty amazing here, what you're getting ready to show. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we definitely have enough devices for online assessment, and, learning management systems have gone through the roof in a positive way from a tech trending perspective. Online and virtual learning is off the charts, but our digital footprint has expanded to now. And then you can see the breakdown of what that footprint looks like. But we now have more mobile, or what we've referred to in the past as next generation devices, more mobile devices than we have kids. This trend line over the past 10 years or so is just a phenomenal look at our belief systems about getting technologies in the hand of kids for learning, anytime, anywhere, always on, in your pocket, in your bag, so that you can use it wherever you are. And this is just a great piece for us to look at. So, David, I wanted to just close out with a couple points. There's been a lot of discussion today about the ESSER II funds. There is significant work at the Kentucky Department of Education to make sure that the guidance as related to ESSER II and also the guidance as related to COVID-19 is modernized and updated. So just released last week, 2 superintendents And if you're not aware of this, I wanted to show you where it is. There is new ESSER 2 guidance on the funding. And we in OET and all across the state with our EdTech leaders, all of what we've learned, we've put in significant effort to make sure that education technology is represented. And so, David, this is just the COVID-19 guidance for ESSER 2 just released last week. And I would ask you to take a look at the education technology portion. It represents the allowable, reasonable, and allocable expenses general for ESSER 2 funding. Now, David, the time after the show that you mentioned, we'll spend a little bit more time talking about that additional program that you mentioned, and how that funnels into the expenses targeting some student services and things
right,
like that.
85%.
Yeah,
I
that's
call
right.
it the 50 million one.
That's right.
The 50 million one.
Yeah.
Well,
David,
thanks.
That's it.
Thank you. Thanks for everyone for joining us. Like I say, we'll stay on. We're going to talk about passwords a little bit more, this other part of funding for those that are interested in it. Anything else that you'd like to talk about? But I'd like to end on this is once again, thank you for Henry County and Russell County Schools for joining us. I always appreciate that portion, the heartbeat from what's really going on at school districts. And our field staff do a really good job at doing that. As well, and make sure we're informed. So Charlotte Chowning and Judy Evans, thank you for your good work, and always get good compliments on you all, along with all of our field staff. But thanks for everyone for joining us, those that are by Teams and those also by YouTube. We're going to stay on for a little bit longer we're going to go ahead and end the YouTube portion of this and stay on for our district leaders, and staff, and then our OET staff. So thanks for joining us on this February day. Hope next weekend was a lot better, but go out there and throw a snowball while you can. Take care.